All right, State of the Union 2023. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jenna Browder alongside David Brody for CBN News' special coverage of President Biden's third address. This is his second State of the Union, but his third address as president. And David, as with every State of the Union speech, the stakes are high. There's a lot on the line tonight.
There really is, Jenna, and I think a lot of it has to do with not just the State of the Union, but what's going to happen going into 2024. Because let's be clear, it is 2023, but the calendar might as well read 2024. A lot of eyes tonight will be on what Joe Biden says and any hints that may be in his speech about what sort of tactic he may take in 2024, if indeed he does run. And we are starting to see a little bit of that tonight with some of the excerpts that have been released. He actually said and I can give you the exact quote. He says, "This is a blue collar blueprint to rebuild America." That's what he's going to be talking about tonight, that blue collar blueprint. And when I saw that line, Jenna, I said to myself, well, that makes sense, right? He is Amtrak Joe after all. He's the blue collar guy. He did well, much better than Hillary Clinton did in 2016 as it relates to the blue collar vote. And I think that's the ticket for Joe Biden and Democrats in 2024. So I think we're starting to see some of the contours of that in tonight's State of the Union speech.
Yeah, in those excerpts that we also saw, talking about progress and resilience coming back post-COVID. He's going to talk a lot about jobs tonight, it looks like, and the economy, and tout that as a win for him. Also, it looks like he'll be talking about working with Republicans. We should mention this is the first address he'll give to a divided Congress.
Well, that's right. It's going to be an interesting dynamic, and all eyes will not just be on President Biden tonight, but also Kevin McCarthy, who will sit behind him, and to kind of see that the facial recognition aspect of this. I'm waiting for the memes to be created. But you're right. It's a divided Congress. And, then the question becomes, what will Joe Biden say specifically regarding bipartisanship? And Jenna, I think this is where the rubber meets the road quite often with Joe Biden. He talks about bipartisanship. And sure, there have been some victories, if you want to call, on the CHIPS bill and a few other bills as well. But overall, this has been a very divided Congress. And so now what do you do exactly? And I think he will reach out to a degree to Republicans tonight. But then again, Jenna, in every State of the Union, Republicans are reaching out to the other side of the aisle. And it just feels a little bit more like pageantry and empty words and rhetoric by both parties, by the way. But Biden has done a lot of that. And then his divisive rhetoric, though, has been something I've noted in the last couple of years, especially as it refers to MAGA Republicans. And I think we may hear that again tonight. It'd be interesting to see. He calls himself the unity president, but there hasn't been much unity in his 2 years in office.
Yeah, we'll be looking to see if he does call out MAGA Republicans, if that walk will match the talk in his actions in the days to follow. David, let's zoom out a little bit and just set the table for our viewers and talk about the landscape that President Biden is facing tonight. Some tough poll numbers out this week. ABC News Washington Post, 41% of Americans say they are worse off financially since President Biden took office. The majority disapprove of the job President Biden is doing. And 2/3 of Americans, David, say the country is headed in the wrong direction. These are all, tough things for the president to face tonight as he goes to address the nation.
There's no doubt about it. And Jenna, that's where the big disconnect comes in, because tonight you're going to hear Joe Biden talk a lot about how the economy is doing much better. Well, what is much better exactly? I mean, inflation roughly was at about 7% or so last year, 9% last year. It's now at about 7% or so, 6.5%. So it's down a little bit, but it's still, the last time I checked, milk is about $4.24 a gallon. Yeah. And a year ago, it was like, what, $4 a gallon. So it's up. Yeah. Milk is up. And so, you can make all of the empirical data arguments you want, but when people go to the grocery store and see that, it's not going to jive with what Joe Biden is saying. So he's got real problems, not just with Americans who are concerned, but Democrats who are concerned about him running again in 2024. I mean, you've got 37% of Democrats that don't want him to run. So he's got an uphill climb, and it's poll after poll, Jenna. I mean, it's not good news for Biden. And so let me just point out one quick thing before we get into a little bit more of the coverage here. He talks about tonight, he's going to talk about that the Biden administration created 12 million new jobs in 2 years. Well, the fact checkers, PolitiFact, actually is saying, and that's nonpartisan, hold on for a second. It's not 12 million new jobs. Actually, economists say that what happened was the Biden administration's policies may have led to more jobs, but definitely not 12 million, more about 7 to 8 million jobs. So there's fuzzy math going on, and there's a lot of difference of opinion. And remember, COVID, we remember COVID, of course, back in 2020, and then when it started to end around 2022 or so, or 2021, excuse me, when Biden started to take office, many of those jobs came back. Biden wants to take credit for that, but a lot of it was because the pandemic was ending. So you're going to have to kind of sift through. You have to be an intelligent consumer tonight and not just listen to the rhetoric coming from not just Joe Biden, but even on the Republican side as well.
Right. And David, we should mention, we should point out, First Lady Jill Biden has just entered the chamber. We've also seen, there she is with the first gentleman, Doug Emhoff, Vice President Kamala Harris's husband. We should mention we just saw Vice President Harris and Speaker Kevin McCarthy in their spots tonight. They'll be seated prominently behind the president. David, we talked a little bit about the tough landscape that the president faces going into tonight. There are a couple of bright spots for him. The November midterms is one. Democrats did much better in these November midterms than they expected to. Also, the past legislation, there's the Inflation Reduction Act that largely has to do with climate, the American Rescue Plan, largely dealing with COVID, and then the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. So the president likely will talk about some of that tonight.
Yeah, he will, and no doubt a feather in his cap. I think there will be pushback, especially on the American on the bill regarding COVID. Because a lot of that might have actually contributed to the inflation we see today, the Recovery Act, American Recovery Act. So I think there's kind of two sides to that a little bit. It's interesting, the State of the Union, Jenna, historically, typically, this has not been done in front of Congress. I mean, we see in our modern day, we know it has been, but it really hasn't been. I mean, George Washington did it in front of Congress. It wasn't called the State of the Union back then. George Washington did it in front of Congress. John Adams did it, second president. And then Thomas Jefferson said, wait a minute, this is seeming a little bit too much like King George here. I don't think we want to do this. And so he decided to write, as the Constitution says that must happen. He wrote, in essence, a letter of correspondence to Congress. And that's where the State of the Union stayed for a long time up to Woodrow Wilson. And now we're back at the State of the Union, where FDR really kind of made it the State of the Union as we know today.
And right now we're watching the president's cabinet walk in. There's Secretary Pete Buttigieg and also several others. Mm-hmm. We see Alejandro Mayorkas, Department of Homeland Security.
Who, by the way, is under fire quite a bit here. Republicans want to see him actually impeached for the problems at the border. So that'll be an interesting storyline to watch. There was actually a hearing today about that.
Yeah, we've seen him take the hot seat on Capitol Hill last week, and like you said, Republicans are bringing articles of impeachment, hoping to get rid of Alejandro Mayorkas. David, that brings up the issue of immigration. Do you think President Biden will address the southern border and the crisis that is down there?
Well, he's definitely going to address it. But of course, that's going to be right for Republicans to criticize him, because the truth of the matter is it's a porous border, not a poor border, but a porous border. And don't take my word for it. Just talk to U.S. Custom and Border Patrol, who say this is the worst month we've had ever since, in history, but definitely ever since Biden took over. And so it just keeps getting worse and worse. Now, he's going to say, let's have a bipartisan solution and secure the border and yada, 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 as they say in Seinfeld. The truth of the matter is, there's no way Republicans and Democrats are coming to an agreement on immigration at all in this Congress. They haven't been able to do it in a very, very long time. As a matter of fact, it's been since Reagan. So would that be 96? Quick math, about almost 40 years.
Yeah, it's an issue that is really tough for Democrats or the party in power to explain. David, in 2022, fiscal year 2022, there were 2.3 million encounters at the southern border. I mean, it used to be that A few years ago, you would hear 1 million, and that sounded like a five-alarm fire. We're talking about 2.3 million encounters in 1 year in 2022. This is an issue that is really, we're starting to hear from Republicans, of course, but also Democrats saying this is not sustainable.
Yeah, and we also heard former President Trump tonight on Truth Social talk about the immigration issue. As a matter of fact, it was one of the top things he talked about in his State of the Union rebuttal. Trump's got to have a word in somewhere along the line, and of course he did it tonight, already talking about the immigration problem. And kind of hearkening back to 2016 and some of his immigration rhetoric back then as well, because obviously he's in the race, and I think this will be a major contour going forward in 2024 for sure. By the way, I saw some Supreme Court justices earlier. I don't think we see him right there, but what's interesting? Sam Alito has never attended a State of the Union. He just won't do it. And Antonin Scalia, I have a quote from Antonin Scalia. He used to attend these State of the Unions, and then he said, quote, in 1997, I'm not going to do it anymore because it is a childish spectacle, according to former Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. And so, indeed, I think a lot of people would probably agree with him on that sentiment to a degree.
David, another issue that we'll be watching tonight is the issue of China. Of course, the infamous spy balloon that was in the sky. Plus, we'll see if the president releases any more information about that. But how tough do you expect the president to be on the issue of China?
Well, I think he's going to be tough on China. But once again, I keep going back to rhetoric versus action. You can be tough on China, but if you're going to shoot down a Chinese spy balloon, I'm sorry, my bad, a research balloon. Okay, right, got it. We'll put research in air quotes. But if you're going to shoot down a Chinese spy balloon over the Atlantic, maybe you should think about shooting it down in the Pacific, like over the Aleutian Islands as it made its way to Alaska, instead of going across the entire country with, by the way, 20 military bases that it went over during the course of its journey. So look, the State of the Unions, I don't want to say they crack me up, they really don't. But the truth of the matter is, what you say is one thing, what you're doing is a whole different matter.
David, you and I were talking earlier today. You mentioned this Trafalgar poll.
Yeah.
This is in light of the China balloon. Only 37% of Americans say the balloon was handled appropriately. And after that incident, 59% say the U.S. looks weaker on the world stage. So is this a liability for the president?
Well, it is. And here's what Biden's going to try to do tonight. I think he's going to try to time Ukraine to China. I guess we can talk about that in a moment.
David, if I could, yes, if I could just interrupt you. Looks like we will be announcing the president.
Mr.
Here.
Speaker, the President of the United States.
President Biden, the 46th President of the United States, has entered the chamber for his second State of the Union address. As we mentioned, David, this is actually his third address to the nation, but his second State of the Union. That first one is more of a, for technical issues, it's not called the State of the Union. But this is a big night for President Biden, especially as he looks to possibly announce a 2024 bid here in the weeks to come. David, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, here's what I thought. I saw Sheila Jackson Lee, the Democrat congresswoman, longtime congresswoman from Texas. She always, at every State of the Union, she gets there hours and hours, like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, to get that seat right on the aisle. And as a matter of fact, the rules in the House are, if you get there early, just get a seat, and you have to stay there. You can't move. And so there are people that will line up for hours to get that aisle shake of the hand with President Biden in this case. And of course, it happens in every single presidency. I will say this about China. I think what Biden's going to do tonight specifically is try to tie the Ukraine-Russia war to China. In other words, they've got to be strong and unified with Ukraine to defeat Russia, because if Russia is not defeated, then that's going to be a problem because China will be emboldened. So in other words, if you can defeat Russia, you can, in a way, not defeat China, but you can give a blow to China, because Russia and China are kind of stapled at the hip. And I think that will be something that you'll hear President Biden talk about tonight.
David, do you think that his speech will hinge more international or more domestic?
I think it'll be domestic. I mean, it is the State of the Union, but of course, in all State of the Union speeches, there will obviously be international, not just overtones. But remember, last year, Jenna, he spoke for a very long time about the situation in Ukraine. Of course, the war had just started about a week earlier. But you'll hear that again tonight. So, yeah, there'll be international flair for sure, or affairs, I should say, not flair. But indeed, I think you'll see mostly domestic issues, especially the debt ceiling, Jenna. That's going to be a big one tonight. What will Joe Biden say about the debt ceiling? Democrats want to raise it. Republicans say, hang on for a second. If you want to raise it, we're going to have to go ahead and have some spending cuts with it. Will Joe Biden give an inch tonight? I think we're going to watch to see what he says on that.
Yeah. And according to the schedule we have here, it looks like his speech will be about 40 minutes, which is in line with most presidents. That's typically about how long they run, maybe a bit on the shorter end of the spectrum. David, we should mention some of the president's guests tonight. The parents of Tyree Nichols, who died at the hands of police in Memphis recently. His parents will be there. Paul Pelosi is one of the president's guests. There you see Nancy Pelosi, his wife. Cancer survivors will be among the president's guests. Bono, and from what I was reading earlier today, David, he'll have a dreamer there, which is interesting given the border and the situation at the border. Do any of these guests surprise you? Run of the mill? Your thoughts?
Well, no, they don't surprise me. The Paul Pelosi thing, that will be probably one of the more emotional moments. Obviously, the Tyree Nichols, the mother and the stepfather will be there. That will be very emotional. It'll be interesting to see what he says about the Tyree Nichols incident, considering that many of the officers I shouldn't say suspected, but actually involved, were African Americans. So how will he maneuver that? But it looks like he's getting ready. What's that?
Hello.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor to present to you the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you. You can smile. It's okay. Thank you. Thank you. Please. Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, our First Lady and Second Gentleman, good to see you guys up there. Members of Congress. By the way, Chief Justice, I may need a court order. She gets to go to the game tomorrow, next week. I have to stay home. Got to work something out here. Members of the Cabinet, leaders of our military, Chief Justice, Associate Justice, and retired Justice of the Supreme Court, and to you, my fellow Americans. You know, I start tonight by congratulating the 118th Congress and the new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. Speaker, I don't want to ruin your reputation, but I look forward to working with you. And I want to congratulate the new leader of the House Democrats, the first African-American minority leader in history, Hakeem Jeffries. He won in spite of the fact I campaigned for him. Congratulations to the longest-serving leader in the history of the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell. Where are you, Mitch? And congratulations to Chuck Schumer, another term as Senate Minority Leader. I think you. Only this time you have a slightly bigger majority, Mr. Leader. You're the majority leader. About that much bigger? Yeah. Well, I tell you what. I want to give special recognition to someone who I think is going to be considered the greatest speaker in the history of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. Folks, the story of America is a story of progress and resilience, of always moving forward, of never, ever giving up. It's a story unique among all nations. We're the only country that has emerged from every crisis we've ever entered stronger than we got into it. Look, folks, that's what we're doing again. 2 years ago, the economy was reeling. I stand here tonight after we've created, with the help of many people in this room, 12 million new jobs, more jobs created in 2 years than any president's created in 4 years, because of you all, because of the American people. 2 years ago, COVID had shut down, our businesses were closed, our schools were robbed of so much, and today, COVID no longer controls our lives. And 2 years ago, democracy faced its greatest threats in civil war. And today, though bruised, our democracy remains unbowed and unbroken. As we gather here tonight, we're writing the next chapter in the great American story, a story of progress and resilience. When world leaders ask me to define America, and they do, believe it or not, I can define it in one word, and I mean this: possibilities. We don't think anything is beyond our capacity. Everything is a possibility. You know, we're often told that Democrats and Republicans can't work together. But over the past 2 years, we've proved the cynics and naysayers wrong. Yes, we disagreed plenty. And yes, there were times when Democrats went alone. But time and again, Democrats and Republicans came together to defend a stronger and safer Europe. You came together to pass once in a generation infrastructure law, building bridges connecting our nation and our people. We came together to pass the most significant law ever, helping victims exposed to toxic burn pits. And in fact, it was important. And in fact, I signed over 300 bipartisan pieces of legislation since becoming president, from reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, to the Electoral Count Reform Act, the Respect for Marriage Act that protects the right to marry the person you love. And to my Republican friends, if we could work together the last Congress, there's no reason we can't work together and find consensus on important things in this Congress as well. I think folks, you all are as formed as I am, but I think the people sent us a clear message. Fighting for the sake of fighting, power for the sake of power, conflict for the sake of conflict gets us nowhere. That's always been my vision of our country, and I know it's many of yours. To restore the soul of this nation, to rebuild the backbone of America, America's middle class, and to unite the country. We've been sent here to finish the job, in my view. For decades, the middle class has been hollowed out in more than, and not no one administration, but for a long time. Too many good-paying manufacturing jobs move overseas. Factories closed down. Once thriving cities and towns that many of you represent became shadows of what they used to be. And along the way, something else we lost: pride, our sense of self-worth. I ran for president to fundamentally change things, to make sure our economy works for everyone, so we can all feel that pride in what we do. To build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down. Because when the middle class does well, the poor have a ladder up, and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well. I know a lot of you always kid me for always quoting my dad, but my dad used to say, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. He really would say this. It's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. Well, folks, so let's look at the results. We're not finished yet by any stretch of the imagination, but unemployment rate is at 3.4%, a 50-year low. A near record unemployment. Near record unemployment for Black and Hispanic workers. We've already created, your help, 800,000 good-paying manufacturing jobs, the fastest growth in 40 years. And where is it written? Where is it written that America can't lead the world in manufacturing? And I don't know where that's written. For too many decades, we imported projects and exported jobs. Now, thanks to what you've all done, we're exporting American products and creating American jobs. Folks, inflation has been a global problem because the pandemic disrupted our supply chains, and Putin's unfair and brutal war in Ukraine disrupted energy supplies as well as food supplies, blocking all that grain in Ukraine. But we're better positioned than any country on earth right now. But we have more to do. But here at home, inflation is coming down. Here at home, gas prices are down $1.50 from their peak. Food inflation is coming down, not fast enough, but coming down. Inflation has fallen every month for the last 6 months, while take-home pay has gone up. Additionally, over the last 2 years, a record 10 million Americans applied to start new businesses. 10 million. And by the way, every time someone starts a small business is an act of hope. And Madam Vice President, I want to thank you for leading that effort to ensure that small businesses have access to capital and the historic laws we enacted that are going to just come into being. Standing here last year, I shared with you a story of American genius and possibilities. Semiconductors, small computer chips the size of a fingerprint that power everything from cell phones to automobiles and so much more. These chips were invented in America. Let's get that straight. They were invented in America. We used to make 40% of the world's chips. In the last several decades, we lost our edge. We're down to only producing 10%. We all saw what happened during the pandemic when chip factories shut down overseas. Today's automobiles need 3,000 chips, each of those automobiles. But American automobiles couldn't make enough cars because there weren't enough chips. Car prices went up, people got laid off. So did everything from refrigerators to cell phones. We can never let that happen again. That's why we came together to pass the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act. Folks, I know I've been criticized for saying this, but I'm not changing my view. We're going to make sure the supply chain for America begins in America. The supply chain begins in America. We've already created 800,000 new manufacturing jobs without this law, before the law kicks in. With this new law, we're going to create hundreds of thousands of new jobs across the country. And I mean all across the country, throughout not just the coast, but through the middle of the country as well. That's going to come from companies that have announced more than $300 billion in investment in American manufacturing over the next few years. Outside of Columbus, Ohio, Intel is building semiconductor factories on 1,000 acres, literally a field of dreams. It's going to create 10,000 jobs, that one investment, 7,000 construction jobs, 3,000 jobs in those factories once they're finished. They call them factories. Jobs paying an average of $130,000 a year, and many do not require a college degree. Jobs. Because we work together, these jobs where people don't have to leave home to search for opportunity. And it's just getting started. Think about the new homes, the small businesses, the medium-sized businesses. So much more that's going to be needed to support those 3,000 permanent jobs and the factories that are going to be built. Talk to mayors and governors, Democrats and Republicans, and they'll tell you what this means for their communities. We're seeing these field of dreams transform to the heartland. But to maintain the strongest economy in the world, we need the best infrastructure in the world. And folks, as you all know, we used to be #1 in the world in infrastructure. We've sunk to 13th in the world. The United States of America, 13th in the world in infrastructure, modern infrastructure. But now we're coming back because we came together and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, the largest investment in infrastructure since President Eisenhower's interstate highway system. And folks, already we've funded over 20,000 projects, including major airports from Boston to Atlanta to Portland. Projects that are going to put thousands of people to work rebuilding our highways, our bridges, our railroads, our tunnels, ports, airports, clean water, high-speed internet, all across America. Urban, rural, tribal. And folks, we're just getting started. We're just getting started. And I mean it sincerely. I want to thank my Republican friends who voted for the law, and my Republican friends who voted against it as well. But I still get asked to fund the projects in those districts as well. But don't worry. I promised I'd be a president for all Americans. We'll fund these projects. And I'll see you at the groundbreaking. Look, this law will further unite all of America. Projects like Brent Spence Bridge in Kentucky over the Ohio River, built 60 years ago, badly needed repairs, one of the nation's most congested freight routes, carrying $2 billion worth of freight every single day across the Ohio River. And folks, I've been talking about fixing it for decades, but we're really finally going to get it done. Yes. I went there last month with Democrats and Republicans, and from both states, to deliver a commitment of $1.6 billion for this project. And while I was there, I met a young woman named Sarah, who's here tonight. I don't know where Sarah is. Is she up in the box? I don't know. Sarah, how are you? Well, Sarah, for 30 years, I learned, she told me she'd been a proud member of the Iron Workers Local 44, known as the Cowboys in the Sky. The folks who built built Cincinnati's skyline. Sarah said she can't wait to be 10 stories above the Ohio River building that new bridge. God bless her. That's pride. And that's what we're also building. We're building back pride. Look, we're also replacing poisonous lead pipes that go into 10 million homes in America, 400,000 school and child care centers. So every child in America can drink the water instead of having permanent damage to their brain. Look, we're making sure that every community in America has access to affordable high-speed internet. No parent should have to drive by McDonald's parking lot to help them do their homework online with their kids, which many thousands were doing across the country. And when we do these projects, and again, I get criticized for this, but I make no excuses for it, we're going to buy American. We're going to buy America. Folks, and it's totally consistent with international trade rules. Buy America has been the law since 1933, but for too long, past administrations, Democrat and Republican, have fought to get around it. Not anymore. Tonight, I'm announcing new standards that require all construction materials used in federal infrastructure projects to be made in America. Made in America. I mean it. Lumber, glass, drywall, fiber optic cable. And on my watch, American roads, bridges, and American highways are going to be made with American products as well. Folks, my economic plan is about investing in places and people that have been forgotten. So many of you listening to me tonight, I know you feel it. So many of you felt like you've just simply been forgotten. Amid the economic upheaval of the past 4 decades, too many people have been left behind and treated like they're invisible. Maybe that's you watching from home. Remember the jobs that went away. You remember them, don't you? The folks at home remember them. You wonder whether the path even exists anymore for your children to get ahead without having to move away. Well, that's why I get that. That's why we're building an economy where no one's left behind. Jobs are coming back. Pride is coming back. Because choices we made in the last several years. You know, this is, in my view, a blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America and make a real difference in your lives at home. For example, too many of you lay in bed at night like my dad did, staring at the ceiling, wondering what in God's name happens if your spouse gets cancer or your child gets deadly ill, or something happens to you. What are you going to get money to pay for those medical bills? Or you're going to have to sell the house or try to get a second mortgage on it. I get it. I get it. With the Inflation Reduction Act that I signed into law, we're taking on powerful interest to bring health care costs down so you can sleep better at night with more security. You know, we pay more for prescription drugs than any nation in the world. Let me say it again. We pay more for prescription drugs than any major nation on earth. For example, 1 in 10 Americans has diabetes. Many of you in this chamber do, and in the audience. But every day, millions need insulin to control their diabetes so they can literally stay alive. Insulin's been around for over 100 years. The guy who invented it didn't even patent it because he wanted it to be available for everyone. It costs the drug companies roughly $10 a vial to make that insulin. Packaging and all, you may get up to $13. But Big Pharma has been unfairly charging people hundreds of dollars, $400 to $500 a month, making record profits. Not anymore. Not anymore. so many things that we did are only now coming to fruition. We said we were doing this, and we said we passed the law to do it, but people didn't know because the law didn't take effect until January 1 of this year. We capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors on Medicare. People are just finding out. I'm sure you're getting the same calls I'm getting. Look, there are millions of other Americans who do not or are not on Medicare, including 200,000 young people with type 1 diabetes and need this insulin to stay alive. Let's finish the job this time. Let's cap the cost of insulin for everybody at $35. Folks, and Big Pharma is still going to do very well, I promise you all. I promise you they're going to do very well. This law also caps and won't even go into effect until 2025. Costs, out-of-pocket drug costs for seniors on Medicare at a maximum of $2,000 a year. You don't have to pay more than $2,000 a year, no matter how much your drug costs are. Because you know why? You all know it. Many of you, like many in my family, have cancer. You know the drugs can range from $10,000, $11,000, $14,000, $15,000 for the cancer drugs. If drug prices rise faster than inflation, drug companies are going to have to pay Medicare back the difference. We're finally giving Medicare the power to negotiate drug prices. Bringing down prescription drug costs doesn't just save seniors money, it cuts the federal deficit by billions of dollars. By hundreds of billions of dollars. Because these prescription drugs are drugs purchased by Medicare to keep their commitment to the seniors. Well, guess what? Instead of paying $400 or $500 a month, you're paying $15. That's a lot of savings for the federal government. And by the way, why wouldn't we want that? Now, some members here are threatening, and I know it's not an official party position, so I'm not going to exaggerate, but threatening to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. As my coach, that's okay, that's fair. As my football coach used to say, lots of luck in your senior year. Make no mistake, if you try anything to raise the cost of prescription drugs, I will veto it. Look, I'm pleased to say that more Americans have health insurance now than ever in history. A record 16 million people are enrolled in the Affordable Care Act. And thanks to the law I signed last year, saving millions are saving $800 a year on their premiums. And by the way, that law was written and the benefit expires in 2025. So my plea to some of you, at least in this audience, let's finish the job and make these savings permanent. Expand coverage of Medicaid. Look, the Inflation Reduction Act is also the most significant investment ever in climate change. Ever. Lowering utility bills, creating American jobs, leading the world to a clean energy future. I visited the devastating aftermath of record floods, droughts, storms, and wildfires from Arizona to Mexico to all the way up to the Canadian border. More timber has been burned, as I've observed from helicopters, than the entire state of Missouri. And we don't have global warming? Not a problem. In addition to emergency recovery, from Puerto Rico to Florida to Idaho, we're rebuilding for the long term. New electric grids that are able to weather major storms and not prevent those forest fires. Roads and water systems withstand the next big flood. Clean energy to cut pollution and create jobs in communities often left behind. We're going to build 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations installed across the country by tens of thousands of IBEW workers. And we're helping families save more than $1,000 a year with tax credits to purchase electric vehicles and efficient appliances, energy-efficient appliances. Historic conservation efforts to be responsible stewards of our land. Let's face reality. The climate crisis doesn't care if you're in a red or blue state. It's an existential threat. We have an obligation, not to ourselves, but to our children and grandchildren, to confront it. I'm proud of how America, at last, is stepping up to the challenge. We're still going to need oil and gas for a while. But guess what? No, we do. But there's so much more to do. We got to finish the job. And we pay for these investments in our future by finally making the wealthiest and biggest corporations begin to pay their fair share. Just begin. Look, I'm a capitalist. But pay your fair share. I think a lot of you at home agree with me and many people that you know. The tax system is not fair. It is not fair. Look, the idea that in 2020, 55 of the largest corporations in America, the Fortune 500, made $40 billion in profits and paid zero in federal taxes? Zero? Folks, it's simply not fair. But now, because of the law I signed, billion-dollar companies have to pay a minimum of 15%. God love them. 15%. That's less than a nurse pays. And let me be crystal clear. I said at the very beginning, under my plans, as long as I'm president, nobody earning less than $400,000 will pay an additional penny in taxes. Nobody, not one penny. But let's finish the job. There's more to do. We have to reward work, not just wealth. Pass my proposal for the billionaire minimum tax. You know, there's 1,000 billionaires in America. It's up from about 600 in the beginning of the term. But no billionaire should be paying a lower tax rate than a school teacher or firefighter. I mean it. Think about it. I mean, look. I know you aren't enthusiastic about that, but think about it. Think about it. Have you noticed Big Oil just reported its profits, record profits? Last year they made $200 billion in the midst of a global energy crisis. I think it's outrageous. Why? They invested too little of that profit to increase domestic production. And when I talk to a couple of them, they say, we're afraid you're going to shut down all the oil wells, all the oil refineries anyway, so why should we invest in them? I said, we're going to need oil for at least another decade, and that's going to exceed and beyond that. We're going to need it. Production. If they had, in fact, invested in the production to keep gas prices down, instead, they used the record profits to buy back their own stock, rewarding their CEOs and shareholders. Corporations ought to do the right thing. That's why I propose we quadruple the tax on corporate stock buybacks and encourage long-term investments. They'll still make considerable profit. Let's finish the job and close the loopholes that allow very wealthy to avoid paying their taxes. Instead of cutting the number of audits for wealthy taxpayers, I just signed a law to reduce the deficit by $114 billion by cracking down on wealthy tax cheats. That's being fiscally responsible. In the last 2 years, my administration has cut the deficit by more than $1.7 trillion. the largest deficit reduction in American history. Under the previous administration, the American deficit went up 4 years in a row. Because those record deficits, no president added more to the national debt in any 4 years than my predecessor. Nearly 25% of the entire national debt that took over 200 years to accumulate was added by just one administration alone, the last one. They're the facts. Check it out. Check it out. How did Congress respond to that debt? They did the right thing. They lifted the debt ceiling 3 times without preconditions or crisis. They paid American bills to prevent an economic disaster to the country. So tonight I'm asking the Congress to follow suit. Let's commit here tonight to the full faith and credit of the United States of America will never, ever be questioned. Some of my Republican friends want to take the economy hostage. I get it, unless I agree to their economic plans. All of you at home should know what those plans are. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you. No, I tell you, I enjoy conversion. You know, it means if Congress doesn't keep the programs the way they are, they'd go away. Other Republicans say, I'm not saying it's a majority of you. I don't even think it's even a significant, but it's being proposed by individuals. I'm not politely not naming them, but it's being proposed by some of you. Look, folks, the idea is that we're not going to be moved into being threatened to default on the debt if we don't respond. Folks, as we all apparently agree, Social Security and Medicare is off the books now, right? They're not to be spent. All right. I'm ready. We got unanimity. Social Security and Medicare are a lifeline for millions of seniors. Americans have to pay into them from the very first paycheck they started. So tonight, let's all agree, and we apparently are. Let's stand up for seniors. Stand up and show them. We will not cut Social Security. We will not cut Medicare. Those benefits belong to the American people. They earned it. And if anyone tries to cut Social Security, which apparently no one's going to do, and if anyone tries to cut Medicare, I'll stop them. I'll veto it. And look, I'm not going to allow them to be taken away. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. But apparently it's not going to be a problem. Next month, when I offer my fiscal plan, I ask my Republican friends to lay down their plan as well. I really mean it. Let's sit down together and discuss our mutual plans together. Let's do that. I can tell you, the plan I'm going to show you is going to cut the deficit by another $2 trillion. And it won't cut a single bit of Medicare or Social Security. In fact, we're going to extend the Medicare Trust Fund at least 2 decades, because that's going to be the next argument. How do we keep it solvent, right? Well, we'll not raise tax on anyone making under 400 grand, but we'll pay for it the way we talked about tonight, by making sure that the wealthy and big corporations pay their fair share. Look. Here's the deal. They aren't just taking advantage of the tax code. They're taking advantage of you, the American consumer. Here's my message to all of you out there. I have your back. We're already preventing Americans from receiving surprise medical bills, stopping $1 billion surprise bills per month so far. We're protecting seniors' life savings by cracking down on nursing homes that commit fraud, endanger patient safety, prescribe drugs that are not needed. Millions of Americans can now save thousands of dollars because they can finally get a hearing aid over the counter without a prescription. Look, capitalism without competition is not capitalism. It's extortion. It's exploitation. Last year, I cracked down with the help of many of you on foreign shipping companies that were making you pay higher prices for every good coming into the country. I signed a bipartisan bill that cut shipping costs by 90%, helping American farmers, businessmen, and consumers. Let's finish the job. Pass the bipartisan legislation to strengthen antitrust enforcement and prevent big online platforms from giving their own products an unfair advantage. My administration has all surcharges too many companies use to make you pay more. For example, we're making airlines show you the full ticket price up front, refund your money if your flight is canceled or delayed. We've reduced exorbitant bank overdrafts by saving consumers more than $1 billion a year. We're cutting credit card late fees by 75% from $30 to $8. Look, junk fees may not matter to the very wealthy, but they matter to most other folks in homes like the one I grew up in, like many of you did. They add up to hundreds of dollars a month. They make it harder for you to pay your bills or afford that family trip. I know how unfair it feels when a company overcharges you and gets away with it. Not anymore. We've written a bill to stop it all. It's called the Junk Fee Prevention Act. We're going to ban surprise resort fees that hotels charge on your bill. Those fees can cost you up to $90 a night at hotels that aren't even resorts. The idea that cable, internet, and cell phone companies can charge you $200 or more if you decide to switch to another provider. Give me a break. We can stop service fees on tickets to concerts and sporting events and make companies disclose all the fees up front. And we'll prohibit airlines from charging $50 round trip for a family just to be able to sit together. Baggage fees are bad enough. Airlines can't treat your child like a piece of baggage. Americans are tired of being. We're tired of being played for suckers. So pass the Junk Fee Prevention Act so companies stop ripping us off. For too long, workers have been getting stiffed, but not anymore. We're beginning to restore the dignity of work. For example, I should have known this, but I didn't until 2 years ago. 30 million workers have to sign non-compete agreements with the jobs they take. 30 million. So a cashier at a burger place can't walk across town and take the same job at another burger place and make a few bucks more. It just changed. But they just changed it because we exposed it. That was part of the deal, guys. Look it up. But not anymore. We're banning those agreements so companies have to compete for workers and pay them what they're worth. And I must tell you, this is bound to get a response from my friends on my left but the right. I'm so sick and tired of companies breaking the law by preventing workers from organizing. Pass the PRO Act, because business have a right, workers have a right to form a union. And let's guarantee all workers have a living wage. Let's make sure working parents can afford to raise a family with sick days, paid family medical leave, affordable child care. That's going to enable millions of more people to go and stay at work. And let's restore the full child tax credit, which gave tens of millions of parents some breathing room and cut child poverty in half to the lowest level in history. And by the way, when we do all these things, we increase productivity. We increase economic growth. So let's finish the job and get more families access to affordable, quality housing. Let's get seniors who want to stay in their homes the care they need to do so. Let's give more breathing room to millions of family caregivers looking after their loved ones. Pass my plan so we get seniors and people with disabilities the home care and services they need. And support the workers who are doing God's work. These plans are fully paid for and we can afford to do them. Restoring the dignity of work means making education an affordable ticket to the middle class. You know, when we made public education, 12 years of it, universal in the last century, we made the best educated, best paid, we became the best educated, best paid nation in the world. But the rest of the world's caught up. It's caught up. Jill, my wife, who teaches full time, has an expression. I hope I get it right, kid. Any nation that out-educates us is going to out-compete us. Any nation that out-educates is going to out-compete us. Folks, we all know 12 years of education is not enough to win the economic competition of the 21st century. We want to have the best educated workforce. Let's finish the job by providing access to preschool for 3 and 4 years old. Studies show that children who go to preschool are nearly 50% more likely to finish high school and go on to earn a 2 or 4 year degree, no matter their background they came from. Let's give public school teachers a raise. We're making progress by reducing student debt, increasing Pell Grants for working and middle-class families. Let's finish the job and connect students to career opportunities starting in high school. Provide access to 2 years of community college, the best career training in America in addition to being a pathway to a 4-year degree. Let's offer every American a path to a good career, whether they go to college or not. And folks, in the midst of the COVID crisis, when schools were closed and we were shutting down everything, let's recognize how far we came in the fight against the pandemic itself. While the virus is not gone, thanks to the resilience of the American people and the ingenuity of medicine, we've broken the COVID grip on us. COVID deaths are down by 90%. We've saved millions of lives and opened up our country. We opened our country back up, and soon we'll end the public health emergency. But that's called a public health emergency. But we'll remember the toll and pain that's never going to go away. More than 1 million Americans lost their lives to COVID. 1 million. Families grieving, children orphaned, empty chairs at the dining room table constantly reminding you that she used to sit there. Remembering them, we remain vigilant. We still need to monitor dozens of variants and support new vaccines and treatments. So Congress needs to fund these efforts and keep America safe. And as we emerge from this crisis stronger, we're also got to double down on prosecuting criminals who stole relief money meant to keep workers and small businesses afloat. Before I came to office, you remember, during that campaign, the big issue was about inspector generals who would protect taxpayers' dollars who were sidelined. They were fired. Many people said we don't need them. And fraud became rampant. Last year, I told you the watchdogs are back. Since then, we've recovered billions of taxpayers' dollars. Now let's triple the anti-fraud strike force going after these criminals, double the statute of limitations on these crimes, and crack down on identity fraud by criminal syndicates stealing billions of dollars from the American people. And the data shows that for every dollar we put into fighting fraud, the taxpayers get back at least 10 times as much. It matters. It matters. Look, COVID left its scars, like the spike in violent crime in 2020, the first year of the pandemic. We have an obligation to make sure all people are safe. Public safety depends on public trust, as all of us know. But too often that trust is violated. Joining us tonight are the parents of Tyree Nichols. Welcome. We had to bury Tyree last week. As many of you personally know, there's no words to describe the heartache or grief of losing a child. But imagine if you lost that child at the hands of the law. Imagine having to worry whether your son or daughter came home from walking down the street, or playing in the park, or just driving a car. Most of us in here have never had to have the talk that brown and black parents have had to have with their children. Bo, Hunter, Ashley, my children. I never had to have the talk with them. I never had to tell them, if a police officer pulls you over, turn your interior lights on right away. Don't reach for your license. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Imagine having to worry like that every single time your kid got in a car. Here's what Tyree's mother shared with me when I spoke to her, when I asked her how she finds the courage to carry on and speak out. With the faith of God, she said her son was, quote, a beautiful soul, and something good will come of this. Imagine how much courage and character that takes. It's up to us, to all of us. We all want the same thing. Neighborhoods free of violence. Law enforcement who earns the community's trust. Just as every cop, when they pin on that badge in the morning, has a right to be able to go home at night, so does everybody else out there. Our children have a right to come home safely. Equal protection under the law is a covenant we have with each other in America. We know police officers put their lives on the line every single night and day. And we know we ask them in many cases to do too much, to be counselors, social workers, psychologists, responding to drug overdoses, mental health crises, and so much more. In one sense, we ask much too much of them. I know most cops and their families are good, decent, honorable people, the vast majority. But they risk their lives every time they put that shield on. But what happened to Tyree in Memphis happens too often. We have to do better. Give law enforcement the real training they need. Hold them to higher standards. Help them succeed in keeping us safe. We also need more first responders and professionals to address the growing mental health, substance abuse challenges. More resources to reduce violent crime and gun crime. More community intervention programs. More investment in housing, education, and job training. All this can help prevent violence in the first place. And when police officers or police departments violate the public trust, they must be held accountable. With the support of the families of victims, civil rights groups, and law enforcement, I signed an executive order for all federal officers, banning chokeholds, restricting no-knock warrants, and other key elements of the George Floyd Act. Let's commit ourselves to make the words of Tyler's mom true. Something good must come from this. Something good. And all of us, Folks, it's difficult, but it's simple. All of us in this chamber, we need to rise to this moment. We can't turn away. Let's do what we know in our hearts that we need to do. Let's come together to finish the job on police reform. Do something. Do something. That was the plea of parents who lost their children in Uvalde. I met with every one of them. Do something about gun violence. Thank God. Thank God we did. Passing the most sweeping gun safety law in 3 decades. That includes things like that the majority of responsible gun owners already support. Enhanced background checks for 18 to 21 years old. Red flag laws, keeping guns out of the hands of people who are a danger to themselves and others. But we know our work is not done. Joining us tonight is Brandon Say, a 26-year-old hero. Brandon put his college dreams on hold to be at his mom's side. His mom's side when she was dying from cancer. And Brandon now works at the dance studio started by his grandparents. And 2 weeks ago, during the Lunar New Year celebrations, he heard the studio door close, and he saw a man standing there pointing a semi-automatic pistol at him. He thought he was going to die, but he thought about the people inside. And in that instant, he found the courage to act and wrestled a semi-automatic pistol away from the gunman who had already killed 11 people in another dance studio. 11. He saved lives. It's time we do the same. Ban assault weapons now. Ban them now. Once and for all. I led the fight to do that in 1994. And in 10 years, that ban was law and mass shootings went down. After we let it expire in the Republican administration, mass shootings tripled. Let's finish the job and ban these assault weapons. And let's also come together on immigration. Make it a bipartisan issue once again. We now have a record number of personnel working to secure the border, arresting 8,000 human smugglers, seizing over 23,000 pounds of fentanyl in just the last several months. We've launched a new border plan last month. Unlawful migration from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela has come down 97% as a consequence of that. But American border problems won't be fixed until Congress acts. If we don't pass my comprehensive immigration reform, at least pass my plan to provide the equipment and officers to secure the border. And a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, those on temporary status, farm workers, essential workers. Here in the People's House, it's our duty to protect all the people's rights and freedoms. Congress must restore the right and the Congress must restore the right that was taken away in Roe v. Wade and protect Roe v. Wade. Give every woman a consular right. The Vice President and I are doing everything to protect access to reproductive health care and safeguard patient safety. But already more than a dozen states are enforcing extreme abortion bans. Make no mistake about it. If Congress passes a national ban, I will veto it. But let's also pass the Bipartisan Equality Act to ensure LGBTQ Americans, especially transgender young people, can live with safety and dignity. Our strength is not just the example of our power, but the power of our example. Let's remember the world's watching. I spoke from this chamber 1 year ago, just days after Vladimir Putin unleashed his brutal attack against Ukraine. a murderous assault, evoking images of death and destruction Europe suffered in World War II. Putin's invasion has been a test for the ages, a test for America, a test for the world. Would we stand for the most basic of principles? Would we stand for sovereignty? Would we stand for the right of people to live free of tyranny? Would we stand for the defense of democracy? For such defense matters to us because it keeps peace and prevents open season on would-be aggressors and threatens our prosperity. 1 year later, we know the answer. Yes, we would, and we did. We did. And together, we did what America always does at our best. We led. We united NATO. We built a global coalition. We stood against Putin's aggression. We stood with the Ukrainian people. Tonight, we're once again joined by Ukrainian's ambassador to the United States. She represents not just her nation, but the courage of her people. Our ambassador is here, we're united in our support of your country. Will you stand so we can all take a look at you? Thank you. Because we're going to stand with you as long as it takes. Our nation is working for more freedom, more dignity, more peace, not just in Europe, but everywhere. Before I came to office, the story was about how the People's Republic of China was increasing its power and America was failing in the world. Not anymore. We made clear, and I made clear in my personal conversations, which have been many, with President Xi, that we seek competition, not conflict. But I will make no apologies that we're investing to make America stronger, investing in American innovation and industries that will define the future that China intends to be dominating, investing in our alliances and working with our allies to protect advanced technologies so they will not be used against us, modernizing our military to safeguard stability and deter aggression. Today, we're in the strongest position in decades to compete with China or anyone else in the world. Anyone else in the world. And I'm committed. I'm committed to work with China where we can advance American interests and benefit the world. But make no mistake about it. As we made clear last week, if China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did. Look, let's be clear. Winning the competition should unite all of us. We face serious challenges across the world. But in the past 2 years, democracies have become stronger, not weaker. Autocracy has grown weaker, not stronger. Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one. Name me one. America's rallying the world to meet those challenges, from climate to global health, to food insecurity, to terrorism, to territorial aggression. Allies are stepping up, spending more and doing more. Look, the bridges we're forming between partners in the Pacific and those in the Atlantic, and those who bet against America are learning how wrong they are. It's never, ever been a good bet to bet against America. Never. Well, when I came to office, most assured that bipartisanship assumed was impossible, but never believed it. That's why a year ago I offered a unity agenda to the nation as I stood here. We made real progress together. We passed a law making it easy for doctors to prescribe effective treatments for opioid addiction. We passed the gun safety law, making historic investments in mental health. We launched the ARPA-H drive for breakthrough in the fights against cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes, and so much more. We passed The Heath Robinson Pact Act, named after the late Iraq War veteran whose story about exposure to toxic burn kits I shared here last year. I understand something about those burn pits, but there's so much more to do. We can do it together. Joining us tonight is a father named Doug from Newton, New Hampshire. He wrote Jill, my wife, a letter, and me as well, about his courageous daughter, Courtney. A contagious laugh, his sister's best friend, her sister's best friend. He shared a story all too familiar to millions of Americans and many of you in the audience. Courtney discovered pills in high school. It spiraled into addiction and eventually death from a fentanyl overdose. She was just 20 years old. Describing the last 8 years without her, Doug said, "There's no worse pain." Yet their family has turned pain to purpose, working to end the stigma and change laws. He told us he wants to start a journey toward American recovery. Doug, we're with you. Fentanyl is killing more than 70,000 Americans a year. Big, you got it. So let's launch a major surge to stop fentanyl production and the sale and trafficking, with more drug detection machines, inspection cargo, stop pills and powder at the border. Working with couriers like FedEx to inspect more packages for drugs. Strong penalties to crack down on fentanyl trafficking. Second, let's do more on mental health, especially for our children. When millions of young people are struggling with bullying, violence, trauma, we owe them greater access to mental health care at their schools. We must finally hold social media companies accountable for experimenting they're doing running children for profit. It's time to pass bipartisan legislation to stop big tech from collecting personal data on our kids and teenagers online, ban targeted advertising to children, and impose stricter limits on the personal data that companies collect on all of us. Third, let's do more to keep this nation's one truly sacred obligation to equip those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they come home. Job training, job placement for veterans and their spouses as they come to return to civilian life. Helping veterans afford the rent, because no one should be homeless in America, especially someone who served the country. Dennis McDonough is here of the VA. We had our first real discussion when I asked him to take the job. I'm glad he did. We were losing up to 25 veterans a day on suicide. Now we're losing 17 a day to the silent scourge of suicide. 17 veterans a day are committing suicide. More than all the people being killed in the wars. Folks, VA is doing everything it can, including expanding mental health screening, proven programs that recruits veterans to help other veterans understand what they're going through, get them the help they need. We got to do more. And fourth, last year, Jill and I reignited the cancer moonshot that I was able to start with President Obama asked me to lead our administration on this issue. Our goal is to cut the cancer death rates at least by 50% in the next 25 years. Turn more cancers from death sentences to treatable diseases. Provide more support for patients and their families. It's personal to so many of us in this audience. Joining us are Morris and Candice, an Irishman and a daughter of immigrants from Panama. They met and fell in love in New York City and got married in the same chapel Jill and I got married in New York City. Kindred spirits. He wrote us a letter about his little daughter, Ava, and I saw her just before I came over. She was just a year old when she was diagnosed with rare kidney disease, cancer. After 26 blood transfusions, 11 rounds of radiation, 8 rounds of chemo, 1 kidney removed, giving a 5% survival rate. He wrote how in the darkest moments he thought, if she goes, I can't stay. Many of you have been through that as well. Jill and I understand that like so many of you. And he read Jill's book describing our family's cancer journey and how we tried to steal moments of joy where we could with Bo. For them, that glimmer of joy was the half smile of their baby girl. It meant everything to them. They never gave up hope. Little Ava never gave up hope. She turns 4 next month. They just found out Ava's beating the odds, is on her way to being cured of cancer. And she's watching from the White House tonight if she's not asleep already. For the lives we can save, for the lives we can save and the lives we've lost, let this be a truly American moment that rallies the country and the world together and proves that we can still do big things. 20 years ago, under the leadership of President Bush and countless advocates and champions, he undertook a bipartisan effort through PEPFAR to transform the global fight against HIV/AIDS. It's been a huge success. He thought big. He thought large. He moved. I believe we can do the same thing with cancer. Let's end cancer as we know it. Cure some cancers once and for all. Folks, there's one reason why we've been able to do all of these things. Our democracy itself. It's the most fundamental thing of all. With democracy, everything's possible. Without it, nothing is. For the last few years, our democracy has been threatened and attacked, put at risk, put to the test in this very room on January the 6th. And then just a few months ago, an unhinged big lie assailed and unleashed a political violence, the home of the then Speaker of the House of Representatives, using the very same language the insurrectionists used as they stalked these halls and chanted on January 6th. Here tonight in this chamber is a man who bears the scars of that brutal attack, but is as tough and as strong, as resilient as they get. My friend Paul Pelosi. Paul, stand up. But such a heinous act should have never happened. We must all speak out. There's no place for political violence in America. We have to protect the right to vote, not suppress the fundamental right. Honor the results of our elections, not subvert the will of the people. We have to uphold the rule of law and restore trust in our institutions of democracy. And we must give hate and extremism in any form no safe harbor. Democracy must not be a partisan issue. It's an American issue. Every generation of Americans has faced a moment where they have been called to protect our democracy, defend it, stand up for it. And this is our moment. My fellow Americans, we meet tonight at an inflection point, one of those moments that only a few generations ever face, where the direction we now take is going to decide the course of this nation for decades to come. We're not bystanders of history. We're not powerless before the forces that confront us. It's within our power of we, the people. We're facing the test of our time. We have to be the nation we've always been at our best, optimistic, hopeful, forward-looking, a nation that embraces light over dark, hope over fear, unity over division, stability over chaos. We have to see each other not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. We're good people. The only nation in the world built on an idea, the only one. nations are defined by geography, ethnicity. But we're the only nation based on an idea that all of us, every one of us, is created equal in the image of God. A nation that stands as a beacon to the world. A nation in a new age of possibilities. So I've come to fulfill my constitutional obligation to report in the State of the Union. And here's my report. Because the soul of this nation is strong, because the backbone of this nation is strong, because the people of this nation are strong, the State of the Union is strong. I'm not new to this place. I stand here tonight having served as long as about any one of you have ever served here. But I've never been more optimistic about our future, about the future of America. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America, and there's nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
All right, and there you have it. The State of the Union is strong, says President Biden. Here he is shaking hands as he leaves the chamber. The speech lasted about an hour and 15 minutes long. David, let's start by getting your overall reaction to the President's State of the Union speech.
Let's try that. How's that? Is that any better?
There we go. We got you.
All right, good. Normally, most people like to hear me on mute, but that's okay. I'm kind of used to that. Hey, look, here's the deal. It was entertaining for sure. It was high energy. It was raucous. You know, I see this as two separate speeches in a way, at least how it's going to be viewed. I mean, I must tell you, I thought Biden had a lot of energy tonight. He started off very well. It was all about America. As a matter of fact, he said the word America 42 times in the speech, a couple of times saying "Buy American." He said infrastructure 6 times, manufacturing 5 times. Infrastructure 17 times, manufacturing 5 times. And you can just go down the list. It was very much a blue-collar blueprint, and that's what I expect Joe Biden to run on in 2024. So that was the contour, and it was going well. ... until what Republicans say he started to lie. And this is what Republicans will harp on. And of course, we know the big dust up we saw tonight regarding what we saw with the debt ceiling comments, where, and I say essentially, I mean, Biden said it straight out. He said that Republicans are okay with letting Medicare and Social Security, in essence, be cut over the debt ceiling fight. Jenna, our audience, that is not true. That is 100% a lie, and that is why that reaction was present tonight in the hall, with Marjorie Taylor Greene even shouting "liar" to Joe Biden, because he was on that line, Jenna. That's a big deal. I mean, you know, it's one thing to fudge some numbers here and there to spin your way. Biden does it. Trump does it. We all do it if you're in politics, if you will. But that was not true. Kevin McCarthy came out 24 hours before this, Jenna, and specifically said Medicare and Social Security cuts are off the table, will not be part of the debt ceiling negotiation. Biden knew that. He was in the meeting with McCarthy, and he said it anyhow. And that's why you got the reaction tonight. So then all of a sudden he talks about oil production, and he says we're going to need oil production for maybe another 10 years or so, and everybody starts cracking up. Really? We're going to get rid of oil in 10 years? So I mean,
Yeah.
the whole thing it just went off the rails, and it's sad, really, if you think about it. If you're a Democrat tonight, if you're Biden tonight, you were going along just fine, and then you stepped on your own your own good fortune because you had a decent speech going, and it got ruined by the lie tonight. And that's what it was. I mean, that's not analysis, that's just fact. It was a lie that Joe Biden said tonight, and it wasn't spin. And I think that is going to be the headline tomorrow.
David, on the Social Security and the Medicare sunset issue, how do you think that'll stick? How do you think that'll land with a lot of people at home? Will they be able to see through? Do they know the nuance? Will they be able to see through what the president was saying? Do you think?
Well, Jenna, it's such a great question you're asking here because you're right. There's a lot of people that will not see through the nuance. I mean, they'll just read, they'll pick up their morning coffee. I'd say pick up the USA Today, but what is it, 1987? No, I'm sorry. They'll look at their phone and they'll just see a headline and go, okay, Republicans want to do that? Oh, that's messed up. And then just continue on their merry day. But that's just not the case. So, I think you're right. You wonder if most people who don't pay attention to this type of stuff will even understand all of this. And that's why you have to be a smart consumer of news.
One other line I thought was interesting. He was actually talking about fentanyl and the crisis there, and somebody in the audience said it's your fault. David, what did you make of that moment? Did you catch that?
I did catch that because, in essence, the Republicans have been saying for a long time that when it comes to immigration, the problem with fentanyl in this country is that it's coming across with the drug cartels at the border. And Biden has been weak at the border and therefore, quote, it's your fault. And so that's what the Republicans have been saying all along. But the fact that we're even in this raucous environment, that type of stuff can even go on in the House chamber, that didn't happen all that often in the past. I remember Joe Wilson back in the day, Congressman Joe Wilson yelling out to Obama, "You lie," and he was censored, or they try to censure him for that. Nowadays, it's just the Wild West out there. I mean, everybody can say whatever they want. So it's a whole different environment. And I thought you saw a lot of the populist strain tonight from the Republicans in the House.
At the same time, we saw Speaker Kevin McCarthy clapping at moments, even standing at moments. There were some moments, I think, David, of support from Republicans and bipartisanship. The president did start by thanking Kevin McCarthy firsthand, the new Speaker of the House. Were there any, glimmers, in your view, of bipartisanship or Biden reaching across the aisle in a very genuine way? Was there any goodwill there?
Well, I think there were a few moments. I mean, I thought the McCarthy moment at the top was really good. And I thought there were a couple other parts where he talked about bipartisan accomplishments and we have to come together as Americans. But then when you step on all of that, Jenna, when you out and out lie about what we talked about earlier. So I think, the damage at that point had been done. He had kind of lost the crowd. We hear, the famous line in one of the movies, was it a Tom Cruise movie? You had me at hello. He had them at that lie and not in a good way. And I think that kind of destroyed any bipartisan moves he made tonight.
David, I was a little surprised that he didn't mention the economy more. From what I was reading today leading up to the coverage, it sounded like he was going to tout more victory with the economy. And he did touch on it some, 3.4 unemployment rate at a 50-year low and some other figures here and there. But I was surprised he didn't talk about it more.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think instead what he did was he tried to make it a blue-collar blueprint, as he mentioned at the top of that speech. So in other words, it was about infrastructure and jobs and about manufacturing, and he brought in the states of Ohio and nurses and doctors and school teachers, and he tried to kind of do it that way because, if you're going to talk about the hard data, that's not necessarily something that Americans are going to be able to gravitate to. But I do think, when you've got milk, that is more expensive now, as we talked about at the top of the broadcast, than it was a year ago. You're going to be hard pressed to make this amazing economic argument. So I think you had to do it that way with blue collar talk.
On that blue collar line, David, he talked about construction materials being made in America. Was that seemed to be a big moment for him? He got a lot of applause from the room.
Well, there's no doubt about it. And then, of course, the reaction to that on Twitter and other places from the conservative orbit will be like, well, hold on for a second. You're taking a line out of Donald Trump's playbook. I mean, if you think about it, if you closed your eyes and didn't have any audio on and you just looked at the speech and you actually just saw the words on a piece of paper, you would think, well, that sounds like Donald Trump. The problem is for Joe Biden is that he might talk about buying American, but he shut down the Keystone Pipeline at the beginning. There's been a lot of problems as it relates to energy infrastructure that haven't materialized under Biden and have taken away jobs from Americans. So once again, the actions and the words not necessarily matching up tonight.
Yeah, he called out a lot of the oil companies saying that they were making record profits. And that was one, I noticed that Kevin McCarthy, he was shaking his head as the president was saying this, saying, you know, Republicans will say that this administration has created a very unfriendly environment for these oil companies to want to invest in future projects. And then he says something like, well, we might have oil for 10 more years.
Yeah.
It's not a good moment.
And then Democrats, remember when Joe Biden said that we're still going to need oil, is what he said. The Democrats started booing. There were Democrats that started booing that. So, I mean, this is where the Republicans and Democrats differ big time. Remember, Democrats want it to be electric vehicles and solar, wind, and power, and AOC and her Green New Deal, and I don't know, go on horseback across the country. Who knows what they want? I mean, they don't want planes. I mean, remember last time I checked, planes need oil. So they don't want planes, the whole thing, planes, trains, and automobiles. Literally, they want to change the environment. So that's why they were booing. And then you have, of course, Republicans on the other hand going, of course we need oil. So that I thought was a big time delineation moment between how the two parties see the future of America.
Yeah. One line that he kept saying throughout the night was, let's finish the job. Mm-hmm. Maybe that harkens to the blue collar tack that he's taking. I'm not sure.
Well, I think so. And also, I think it was kind of like a backhanded way of saying, hey, I'm not done yet. So don't judge me 2 years in. Give me another year or two and let's finish the job, because he believes this infrastructure bill that we know about is going to bring a lot of jobs into the mix. And when it comes to final fruition, it'll be good economically. So I think he's like, hey, at the 2-year mark, if you will, give me another year and a half, and let me show you, and let me finish the job.
David, let's talk about looking forward, these next 2 years that he has. Read the tea leaves for us. What did he give us a map of where he's going?
Well, sure. And I think overall it's going to be about playing to the Rust Belt, playing to this idea that he's not going to talk so much about the economy with the numbers as much as he's going to, in essence, talk about what it means to be an American, and the jobs are coming here. And he's going to kind of make it like this Rust Belt, Trumpian, in a way, Elizabeth Warren populist economic agenda. And I think that Elizabeth Warren did a lot of that when she ran for president. I think that we saw some of that with Biden today. So I think he's basically going to take that. And because he can't talk about, well, inflation's kind of high, and milk is kind of, the prices of milk is a problem. So he's got to kind of figure out a backdoor way to do it.
This was one quote: "My economic plan is for the people who have felt forgotten."
Yeah.
David, let's talk about some of the things internationally, Ukraine and China. This struck me when talking about Ukraine. He said, "We're going to stand with you as long as it takes." That might have surprised some people. Does that mean financially? What does that exactly mean?
I think it does mean financially. I think not only does it mean financially, but then the question is, well, what's next? I mean, if this war continues, what are we talking about from a military standpoint as it relates to aircraft, et cetera, supplies, all of that? So the good news for Biden is that the Republican Party is fractured on Ukraine. I mean, there's establishment GOP folks who want to send more money to Ukraine and keep the gravy train going. And then there's a growing number of Republicans, that populist crowd, but more than just the populist crowd, even some more after that are like, well, hold on, we need some checks and balances here. And not only that, but I don't think we should give another dime to Ukraine. So the Republican Party is fractured, and that gives Biden an opportunity to, in essence, kind of do what he needs to do on Ukraine and not get too much blowback for it because Republicans aren't on the same page right now.
David, was he tough enough in your view on China?
No, I don't think he was. I mean, he talked about, kind of working with China, but don't worry if they, if it's an act of, to protect American sovereignty, I'm going to take care of it like I did last week. And it was one line about the balloon. He didn't even use the word balloon. I mean, it was just a kind of a quick bypass and we're moving on. So no, I thought this was definitely a domestic centered speech on blue collar jobs. And that's what he wanted the American people to take away from it. But I think, like I said, he got derailed in the middle there with the debt ceiling.
We should mention we are waiting the Republican rebuttal from Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So any minute now, she will be giving the Republican rebuttal from Little Rock, Arkansas, the governor's mansion there. David, let's talk about Sarah for a minute. Why did the GOP choose her?
Well, there are a couple different reasons. First of all, young, up and coming, new governor, all of that energy. A lot of people are making a big deal about the Donald Trump tie-in. And of course, there's the Donald Trump tie-in. But I think overall, Republicans need to do better with suburban women. Sarah Huckabee Sanders can play to that. She's a parent. She's got the small kid. She's got the whole kind of persona, if you will. She's folksy. She's great on camera. She speaks well. She's eloquent. And I think the Republicans want to, in essence, focus in on, that school board issue, the parental rights, the critical race theory, the gender ideology going on in schools, the fact that the wokeness and the left has gone far to the left. And I think Sarah Huckabee Sanders is a pretty good representation, someone that can do that well and has the street cred to deliver, especially from a suburban mom standpoint. And I think that was the big reason.
She's former President Trump's press secretary, so we know she's good at responding in real time, and they will likely have some fire to throw at this speech. David, for critics, they might say that she's too MAGA. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think she's too MAGA means different things to different people. Look, I don't see that at all. I mean, she was just elected governor in Arkansas. She represents her state. Her state went big for Donald Trump. So I think it makes sense, that she's representing those values. And then the question becomes, Jenna, what are those values? Everybody says MAGA. Well, let me be clear about MAGA. There are two strains to MAGA. There's MAGA, which are patriotic Americans who just, love the country. And then there's the dark MAGA, the ones that are angry. Some of the folks that got arrested on January 6th, that type of strain, that maybe into some of that Christian nationalism where it runs amok of God's word. That dark MAGA is different than MAGA. I think the overall MAGA movement, something that Donald Trump basically tapped into, wasn't just a bunch of angry, white people in the middle of the country. I think he tapped into a disgruntled, frustrated, populist people in America that were not just Republicans, but also independents and some soft Democrats. And that really is more MAGA. It's a heartland and a Rust Belt feel. That is really what MAGA is all about. And I think Sarah Sanders represents that pretty well.
David, what are you expecting to hear from her tonight?
I think a lot about the parental rights issue. I think she'll talk about the suburbs, about moms, about the fact that the left has gone out of control and that we got to get this country back to sanity, and the fact that common sense has escaped the Democrats. And I think that is a lot of what we're going to hear tonight. And it'll be interesting to see, you mentioned she's good in real time. It'll be interesting to see if she picks up. I mean, she clearly picked up on the fact that Biden lied about Social Security, Medicare. It'll be interesting to see if that's an addition to her speech tonight, to see if she'll react to that in real time, to say, see, this is why you can't trust Biden and the Democrats, because they're lying right to your face. It would be an interesting moment if she does that. But my guess is she probably won't, because those speeches are typically so scripted and down to the minute and the second. But we'll see.
Politico was out with this headline, David, or maybe not. It wasn't a headline, but I was reading this today. Trump gets proof that his imprint on the GOP endures. When talking about Sarah Huckabee Sanders getting this honor to give the Republican rebuttal, them saying that this is proof that his imprint on the Republican Party endures. Your reaction to that?
It's true. I mean, I read the article. There was a lot of snark in there. Kind of Politico does some snark at times, but I thought it was right overall. I mean, Donald Trump has made obviously an imprint on the Republican Party and still does. And we're seeing it tonight with Sarah Sanders, the fact that she's actually speaking and giving the rebuttal. But this is more. I mean, if you think of everybody talked about Donald Trump and his win-loss record as it relates to some big losses in the GOP, or excuse me, the midterm elections, and that's true for sure. But if you look at the overall record, what was he like? I don't know, 212 and 11 or something like that. In other words, he had a lot more victories, and a lot more people would love the support of Donald Trump. Yeah, is there more baggage with it today? Sure, but look, he's still very, very popular.
David, we're watching the president leave the chamber. He's still shaking hands with lawmakers and people in his cabinet. We keep seeing, tomorrow morning when the stories are written, what do you think will be some of the biggest headlines from the president's speech tonight?
By the way, your pitch is required.
Sir, good to see you. Thanks for your time tonight. And want to catch up again on the California water. We let 500,000 acres go dry.
And I think we might be having some issues with David's feed. Right now, we are watching President Biden leave the chamber. He just gave a State of the Union address. It was about an hour and 15 minutes long. The president highlighting his agenda moving forward, where he thinks the country stands right now, and in many ways signaling what could be his 2024 presidential campaign. The chamber emptying out. Any minute now, we are waiting for Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, to give her Republican rebuttal. And she will be coming to us from the governor's mansion in Little Rock. We were talking with David about why the GOP chose Sarah Sanders to give this rebuttal. A lot of issues as it relates to parents. She's a parent of 3 children, I believe. She's a fighter. And she's a woman. I think Republicans believe, as David was saying, that there's the need to make inroads with the suburban women. So we will wait for Sarah Huckabee Sanders to give the Republican rebuttal. David was talking about who she appeals to. She, of course, appeals to women, to mothers, to parents. The issue of parents' rights becoming a huge issue in the 2022 midterms and the Virginia governor's race with Glenn Youngkin. We saw parents come out in force and support candidates who would give power back to the parents. I believe we're trying to get David's shot back. All right. We're expecting Sarah's speech to be anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes, and let's see, right now it's almost 11:15. She should be coming on very shortly here. Dan, any updates? All right, Dan, can we take the live feed of the chamber? Okay. So, Dan, are we on, or what are we? Okay, we are still live. All right, bear with us here. We're having technical issues. Dan, maybe we could take a quick break while we get David's shot back and we await Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Okay, and we'll be right back. Stick with us. Are we on? Dan? All right, I think we might have David back here. All right, David, are you with us? Okay, I think David might still be frozen. Dan, can we get an update? All right, David appears to be uh, coming in and out. We're working on his feed right now. But as we were saying, Sarah Huckabee Sanders should be giving the Republican rebuttal any minute now. President Biden just gave his third State of the Union address. It was actually a second State of the Union, third address for technical reasons. He spoke for about an hour and 15 minutes. He talked about a host of different issues. A lot of topics we were anticipating tonight. Talked about unity, finding consensus with Republicans, coming together with Republicans. Of course, this was the first time he'd addressed a divided Congress, now with Republicans in control of the House. We saw him talk about the economy and tout some positive numbers for the economy under his presidency. 3.4% unemployment rate, which is historically low. That, of course, comes with inflation at 6.5% and wage gains at only about 4%. So, of course, he didn't mention that, but just some context there. Talked about the debt ceiling. They're trying to come there.
Taught me not to believe every story I hear. So forgive me for not believing much of anything I heard tonight from President Biden. From out-of-control inflation and violent crime to the dangerous border crisis and threat from China, Biden and the Democrats have failed you. They know it, and you know it. And it's time for a change. Tonight, let us reaffirm our commitment to a timeless American idea that government exists not to rule the people, but to serve the people. Democrats want to rule us with more government control, but that's not who we are. America is the greatest country the world has ever known because we're the freest country the world has ever known, with a people who are strong and resilient. 5 months ago, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. It was a hard time for our family, particularly our kids, Scarlett, Huck, and George. But we kept our faith and persevered. Thanks to exceptional doctors here in Arkansas, a successful surgery, and the grace of God, I am cancer-free. Through it all, I couldn't help but think about my mom. She was 20 years old and in her first year of marriage when she was diagnosed with spinal cancer. The doctors told her she might not live, and if she did live, they said she'd never walk again. And if she did walk, she'd definitely never have children. The daughter she was told she'd never have was just sworn in as the new governor of Arkansas and is speaking to you tonight. Adversity and fear of the unknown can paralyze us, but faith propels us to charge boldly ahead. We can't stand still in the face of great challenges. You and I were put on this earth for such a time as this, to charge boldly ahead. I'll be the first to admit, President Biden and I don't have a lot in common. I'm for freedom, he's for government control. At 40, I'm the youngest governor in the country. And at 80, he's the oldest president in American history. I'm the first woman to lead my state, and he's the first man to surrender his presidency to a woke mob that can't even tell you what a woman is. In the radical left's America, Washington taxes you and lights your hard-earned money on fire. But you get crushed with high gas prices, empty grocery shelves, and our children are taught to hate one another on account of their race, but not to love one another or our great country. Whether Joe Biden believes this madness or is simply too weak to resist it, his administration has been completely hijacked by the radical left. The dividing line in America is no longer between right or left. The choice is between normal or crazy. It's time for a new generation of Republican leadership. Upon taking office just a few weeks ago, I signed executive orders to ban CRT, racism, and indoctrination in our schools, eliminate the use of derogatory term Latinx in our government, repealed COVID orders, and said never again to authoritarian mandates and shutdowns. Americans want common sense from their leaders, but in Washington, the Biden administration is doubling down on crazy. President Biden inherited the fastest economic recovery on record, the most secure border in history, cheap, abundant, homegrown energy, fast rising wages, a rebuilt military, and a world that was stable and at peace. But over the last 2 years, Democrats destroyed it all. Despite Democrats' trillions in reckless spending and mountains of debt, we now have the worst border crisis in American history. As a mom, my heart breaks for every parent who has lost a son or daughter to addiction. 100,000 Americans a year are now killed from drug overdoses, largely from fentanyl pouring across our southern border. Yet the Biden administration refuses to secure the border and save American lives. And after years of Democrat attacks on law enforcement and calls to defund the police, violent criminals roam free, while law-abiding families live in fear. Beyond our border, from Afghanistan to Ukraine, from North Korea to Iran, President Biden's weakness puts our nation and the world at risk. And the president's refusal to stand up to China, our most formidable adversary, is dangerous and unacceptable. President Biden is unwilling to defend our border, defend our skies, and defend our people. He is simply unfit to serve as commander-in-chief. And while you reap the consequences of their failures, the Biden administration seems more interested in woke fantasies than the hard reality Americans face every day. Most Americans simply want to live their lives in freedom and peace. But we are under attack in a left-wing culture war we didn't start and never wanted to fight. Every day we are told we must partake in their rituals, salute their flags, and worship their false idols, all while big government colludes with big tech to strip away the most American thing there is, your freedom of speech. That's not normal. It's crazy, and it's wrong. Make no mistake, Republicans will not surrender this fight. We will lead with courage and do what's right, not what's politically correct or convenient. Republicans believe in an America where strong families thrive in safe communities, where jobs are abundant and paychecks are rising, where the freedom our veterans shed their blood to defend is the birthright of every man, woman, and child. These are the principles Republican governors are fighting for, and in Washington, under the leadership of Senate Republicans and Speaker Kevin McCarthy, we will hold the Biden administration accountable. Down the street from where I sit is my alma mater, Little Rock Central High. As a student there, I will never forget watching my dad, Governor Mike Huckabee, and President Bill Clinton hold the doors open to the Little Rock Nine. Doors that 40 years earlier had been closed to them because they were Black. Today, those children once barred from the schoolhouse are now heroes memorialized in bronze at our State House. I'm proud of the progress our country has made, and I believe giving every child access to a quality education, regardless of their race or income, is the civil rights issue of our day. Tomorrow, I will unveil an education package that will be the most far-reaching, bold, conservative education reform in the country. My plan empowers parents with real choices, improves literacy and career readiness, and helps put a good teacher in every classroom by increasing their starting salary from one of the lowest to one of the highest in the nation. Here in Arkansas and across America, Republicans are working to end the policy of trapping kids in failing schools and sentencing them to a lifetime of poverty. We will educate, not indoctrinate our kids, and put students on a path to success. It's time for a new generation to lead. This is our moment. This is our opportunity. A new generation born in the waning decades of the last century, shaped by economic booms and stock market busts, forged by the triumph of the Cold War and the tragedy of 9/11. A generation brimming with passion and new ideas to solve age-old problems. A generation moored to our deepest values and oldest traditions, yet unafraid to challenge the present order and find a better way forward. If we seize this moment together, America can once again be the land of the free and the home of the brave. During my 2.5 years at the White House, I traveled on every foreign trip with the president. A trip I will never forget was on December 25th of 2018. My husband Brian and I had just cleaned up wrapping paper that was shoved into every corner of our house, thanks to our 3 kids. When I had to walk out on my own family's Christmas, unable to tell them where I was going that night, because the place I'd be traveling was so dangerous, they didn't want anybody to know that the president was going to be on the ground, even for a few hours. We boarded Air Force One in complete and total darkness. There were no lights on the plane, no lights on the runway. Our phones and computers shut down and turned in. We were going completely off the grid. Nearly 12 hours later, in the pitch black of night, we landed in the war-torn part of Western Iraq. It was again a similar scene. No lights on the plane, no lights on the runway. The only thing you could see was coming from about a mile away in a dining hall where hundreds of troops who were in the fight against ISIS had gathered expecting to celebrate Christmas with senior military leadership from around the region. They had absolutely no idea that the president and first lady were about to walk into that room. And when they did, it was a sight and a scene and a sound I hope I never forget. The room erupted. Men and women from every race, religion, and region, every political party, every demographic you can imagine, started chanting in perfect unison over and over and over again, USA, USA, USA. It was an absolutely perfect picture of what makes our country great. One of the young soldiers yelled from the back, "Mr. President, I re-enlisted in the military because of you." And the president said, "And son, I'm here because of you." Shortly after, that young soldier came up to me. He said, "Sarah, you have a tough job." I told him, "What I do is nothing. You take bombs and bullets. That's a tough job." And in a moment that I know I'll cherish for the rest of my life, that soldier reached up and he pulled the Brave Rifles patch he wore on his shoulder, and he placed it into my hand, a sign of ultimate respect. And he said, "Sarah, we are in this together." Overwhelmed with emotion and speechless, I just hugged him with tears in my eyes and a grateful heart for our heroes who keep us free. That young man and everyone who has served before him, all of those who serve alongside him, and the thousands we know who will be called upon to serve after him deserve to know they have a country and a community back home doing our part in the fight for freedom. America is great because we are free. But today, our freedom is under attack, and the America we love is in danger. President Biden and the Democrats have failed you, and it's time for a change. A new generation of Republican leaders are stepping up, not to be caretakers of the status quo, but to be change makers for the American people. We know not what the future holds, but we know who holds the future in his hands. And with God as our witness, we will show the world that America is still the place where freedom reigns and liberty will never die. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless America.
All right, and that was Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, giving the Republican rebuttal and painting a picture of how different she and the Republican Party is from President Biden. One quote from Sarah: "Forgive me for not believing much of anything I heard from the president tonight." With that, let's bring in David. David, she had some pretty cutting words for the president and Democrats. Your thoughts on her rebuttal?
She did. And first of all, my first thoughts are sorry to leave you there, Jenna, there for a moment. I think I looked up the sky, saw a balloon, and then boom, I was gone. Transmission was cut. Just kidding. There was no balloon in the sky. So I apologize for that. Look, where do I begin? Sarah Sanders kind of summed up in a way the 2024 contour of the race tonight. And it's in 3 words: crazy versus normal. I think that's the theme of the Republicans going forward, especially from a presidential standpoint. Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, look, enough with the woke fantasies, enough with the crazy gender ideology and the critical race theory and all of that type of stuff. The bottom line is that there was a play tonight by Sarah Sanders to the Rust Belt, and we've talked about that a lot tonight, the Rust Belt and the heartland of the country, to bring back sanity again, make sanity great again. And I think Sarah Sanders hit on that tonight. She talked a lot about the crazy versus normal stuff a lot in that speech tonight. And so if you contrast that with Joe Biden, he's also making a play for the heartland. And he's saying, look, buy American. America's great. Economic populism. It's okay. We're going to get it. Rust Belt, heartland, jobs. So he's trying to make the economic populism argument in the Rust Belt and the heartland. Sarah Sanders laying out tonight the cultural battle in the heartland in the Rust Belt. And I think that's where we find ourselves tonight. And I actually believe, and I didn't think this going into tonight, but coming out of tonight, I truly believe that we have seen the contours of the 2024 presidential race shape up tonight in those 2 speeches that we saw delivered.
David, what did you make of Sarah Huckabee Sanders' tone? It was definitely a bit downcast. Right word?
Interesting. I don't know if I would use the word downcast. I mean, I think it was a bit solemn, I guess, to a degree. But, I think she was trying to be, how do I say this? She was trying to kind of be calm, and her, I know Sarah. I've known Sarah almost 20 years. My gosh, I can't believe I'm aging myself. I'm dating myself here. But that is Sarah Sanders. I mean, she's very even keel. She just is. Nothing much rattles her. And I kind of think we saw that tonight. Maybe downcast a little bit, only just because of the state of the country. And she's kind of weeping, if you will, internally for the soul of the country.
Maybe a better question, David, is did you think she struck a tone that was hopeful enough?
Well, that's a good question. And it's actually a good point, because I don't think she actually was going for hopeful. I mean, I think she was going for concerned, and we better get to work or we're in a whole lot of trouble in this country. And that was the impression I got from her. So I think it was a cautious speech. I think it was one that she felt like the best is yet to come if we do X, Y, and Z. But right now, on the trajectory that America is at, I think she's very concerned, and I think we saw that reflected in her voice tonight, Jenna.
All right. Well, David, I believe we're wrapping here in just a moment, but this was fun tonight. It's great to do this coverage with you, and I think you're going to be on the 700 Club tomorrow, recapping.
I will. I want to get beauty sleep, and trust me, in my case, I need to get a lot. So I'll be on the 700 Club in the morning. Yes.
And of course, you can go to cbnnews.com. Well, there'll be the stories as well. And David, this is great. Thank you so much. And to all of our viewers who joined us tonight. It's a long night. It's a late night, but we appreciate you sticking with us through some technical difficulties and feeds going off and, just all that is, comes with TV. So
yeah.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Have a great night.